Hello, everyone. Well, we have finally made it to the last bit of the material for the course. What a semester. So we're going to go over chapters 14 and 15 in two parts. We're going to be covering mass communication, also known as mass media, and the digital online world. And really, these days, everything's kind of converging. So we're going to talk about this as though they're distinct, but they really all blur one into another these days. Like I said, this is the last of the material that we're going to cover. It's the last of the material that's going to be on the last test. Just as a reminder, make sure to do the quizzes, continue with the discussions and participation. That last test is, I'm going to have that open for a couple days at the beginning of the exam week. And also remember that the paper is due on the 24th. What are we going to be covering exactly? We're going to try to understand mass media. And mass media has effects on us. It's pretty well documented. Mass media also serve individual needs and desires, influence knowledge and perspectives, and in some cases advance ideology. There's a phrase down at the bottom here, media literacy, and that's something to shoot for. It's a very complex and kind of overwhelming media and technology environment out there, and we really need to take an active role in making sense of that. We need to get educated on that. We need to think critically. We can't just accept everything that we're exposed to out there. We'll talk a little bit about the features of digital media and how it affects human thinking. There are uses and abuses. Some folks use it to form their identity. It can help us connect with others, for instance, through social media. Learning, how about that? And these slides were put together last semester, and we're really kind of testing out whether digital means can effectively deliver learning and education. It's very much a part of professional communication. Organizing, meaning organizing groups and movements and that sort of thing, but it can also be used to interfere politically, as we know from 2016, and I'm sure it's going on now with the 2020 election. Digital means are used to harass, and of course, it allows mobs to form as well. Some of the tips from the author are that you should consciously manage your engagement with digital media, and think about your usage before you engage. This is the activity. One of the activities for, I think it's week 13, is to do a short survey. Look for my directions there, and that is involving a theory, mean world syndrome, where more media consumption supposedly correlates with a negative worldview. Again, so much has been changing and in flux that some of the studies that are cited in the text are a little bit dated, and it kind of have to be retested in the new environment. And I also, one of the last activities was just to kind of take a inventory of your tech use, listing out everything that you use that's technology related, and then commenting to me whether you feel comfortable with your usage levels, you think it's fine, you think it's too much, or maybe even too little. Mass media are forms of communication that address large audiences or publics. Books, films, television, radio, newspapers, advertising, magazines, and other forms of visual, audio, and print communication that reach multitudes of people. It does not include some things. It doesn't include email messages, instant messages, tweets, and texting. I think this is a little dated because the president has used tweets to reach a mass audience. So tweets would actually qualify as mass communication. And then again, I mentioned that the text, even though the edition's not that old, it talks about something called web TV, which I don't really think ever got off the ground. Everything's streaming now with Amazon and Netflix and all the other services. This is just a little timeline, the epochs in human history, and you can kind of look at each side of that arrow. Look below the arrow. Talking, hearing was just the main media, air in our eardrums. Then there was the words in the alphabet, print, putting together books. Books haven't been around that long, all things considered. And the telegraph, which was much more recent. And we also went through an era when broadcasting was introduced. Think about how mind-blowing that must have been. That signals and audio and video could be transported over long distances. I mean, the internet is pretty mind-blowing, but that is too. And now we've got social media, which most of the planet is involved with that, depending on what your preferences are. There are certainly effects. One of the phrases is used is uses and gratifications. A lot of research has been done under that phrase. And why do people seek out specific media to serve needs? It could be simply you want to relax and you want to be entertained. Yeah, it's been a long day, so you turn on a movie. There's a theory that's called agenda setting that puts forth that, and again, this is a little bit of a dated research that the broadcast news would influence people's knowledge and perceptions. That the media is so splintered now that it's hard to really say what is influencing what. I mean, back 40 years ago, there was 3 major networks. Now, with cable and streaming, there's just hundreds, if not thousands. Cultivation theory is something that, over time, exposure to media influences perception. That's pretty clear that happens. So let's get a little more into uses and gratifications. This theory states that we use media to gratify ourselves. We select a media that we think will give us something we value or want. So I'm going to pass, just move ahead from this slide. This is something you could use for your paper, but I hope by the time you're watching this, you're done or close to done with that paper. Cultivation theory is just that it influences our perceptions. And, you hear sometimes in the media itself, people questioning the influence of media and maybe some people overstating it. But there's no question that there's an influence of some kind going on. This was the activity with mean world syndrome, that consumption of specifically television would affect people's worldview. And I mean, when you think about it, when you turn on most of the news is bad, right? Local news and national news and international news might differ a bit, but a lot of it's just not very good news, right? You see a lot of local news trying to inject more positive stories, but by and large, a lot of the material that's covered on the news is negative. So it just follows that would affect our perceptions of the world. Obviously, one of the questions I asked for discussions in these last couple of weeks is the media's coverage of the coronavirus outbreak, and whether it's had too much of an influence or really freaked people out more than it should, or perhaps not. Perhaps it's an accurate reflection of the danger that we have all faced. We're not going to get too much into this, but media has certainly been used on a political level to advance ideologies. And really the key is that we want to learn to understand. We want to learn the ins and outs of the media. And this is not going to be from one class, and this is a lifetime endeavor. I've got my graduate degrees are in journalism and media and technology, and I'm still learning. I don't have this all figured out, but I'm very skeptical and critical of what I see. I don't just take things at face value that I see in the media. So if we had more time, we would work on this, developing media literacy. I'll post these slides just with the PowerPoint. You can check out this a little bit more, but this kind of shows us the stages of development of media literacy. So this is going to close the first part of chapter 14 and 15.